One of the biggest problems that we face as pastors is comparing ourselves among ourselves. The Bible says it's not wise. One of my biggest struggles in trying to find out who I was and what I was supposed to do was coming to a conference, listening to a man or a woman of God and saying, how can I be more like them? Because obviously I'm not good enough. What's happened in my life, or happening, it's an ongoing process happening in my life, is learning that God has given this world one me. He's given this world one you. And the more you hide it, the less our world benefits from it. You're not trying to imitate anybody else. You're not trying to present like somebody else. You're not trying to teach a certain way. You're not trying to preach like T.D. Jakes, or you're not trying to flow in an anointing like Dr. Clark, or you're not, whatever it is, stop comparing yourself amongst other people. You're hurting your own church by your insecurity. I don't mean that like a downer on you. I'm trying to speak from a person who relates that until we can get a grasp of who it's really about, we're not going to be successful. So let me touch on assimilation. Again, I've only got a little bit of time today, so I want to get in. This session is about assimilation, helping people belong to a family. And I will be honest, I'm going to speak in this session much different than I would have 6 months ago. We are a church in a town of about 1,000 people, and you could go through all the numbers that you count, and it determines what matters to you. Prior to COVID, we had one church, one location, our main location in a town of, I should say it's 1,200, I'm rounding up. That's what the sign says. I don't know really how many people are in North City, but the sign says that. And we averaged 987 people on a Sunday morning in one location. And then we started another location, and Paul Martini, who's here, spoke at our second location the last Sunday before COVID hit in March 2020. Obviously went through a lot of challenges during COVID like a lot of other people, but then this last November we've started our third location in another community. These are all rural communities. The largest community we're in is 7,000 people. And so what I believe God has asked me to do, He's called me to the rural area. And so I don't know what city you're in, or I don't know what demographic you're in, but I want to encourage you that God has a plan for your community, and He wants you to be a part of that solution. And so when I talk about assimilation, here's the word assimilation. 10 years ago, I wouldn't even be able to tell you what that word meant. I just didn't know much about church growth at all. It means to absorb into the culture or tradition of a population, a group, or a system. To absorb into something. What is assimilation traditionally in the church? It's moving someone from being an attender only to becoming a part of a body, part of a family, part of a group. It also means to get someone to find their purpose or their position, using their gifting and calling to live a fulfilled life. Those are some traditional definitions for assimilation in church life, helping them move forward. But it's not about just getting them connected, but what we're getting connected them to and what that connection does for them individually. Again, I've been to a lot of church growth conferences, and I'm going to be very careful. I'm not criticizing any other system. I'm just going to bring a different angle and encourage us from two different ways. Part of it's going to be my testimony. If I have time to give some of that, I will. Here's one of the tendencies we can have as pastors. We can simply look for the system or structure to adopt that will help people get plugged into the church itself. And we will say, we'll take copious notes and say, give me the structure, give me the system that's going to make my church go. We think it's the next system, what this guy or gal's doing, what they're doing. I need to start what they're doing. And I jumped all around. Okay, I need to do what they're doing this. Okay, I need to do that. They're doing this. I need to do that. What are they doing? Wow. Okay, I need to do that too. And so I'm coming back to our team and giving all kinds of new stuff after every conference that we need to do. And they're probably wondering, what in the world will you land on something? And this is what imitation will get you. It will get you chasing your tail, trying to be something that God has never called you to be or spoken to you about. There's a lot of good systems and structures. So I want to do this from a certain angle today, and hopefully it'll be helpful. We do need systems or structures. Do not hear me incorrectly there. But here's the problem. We can become more about getting people on a serve team and identifying them by where they serve instead of who they are becoming. I kind of stammered on that. Let me say it again. If we're not careful in church growth format and getting people to serve, the tendency can be more about getting John Doe to identify with being on a team than we are about who John Doe is becoming. So John Doe comes into our church and John Doe becomes an usher. We go, check, John's involved. John's an usher. But what is John becoming? A better usher. No, that's not what we're called to do. You and I were not called to grow teams. We're called to grow disciples. I'll talk about that more in just a minute. Let me move forward. All right, if you're looking for a Bible verse, let's go to Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1. I want to talk about the focus, because the system or structure is important. The small group is important. The serve team is important. But those things are all supposed to be about what they are unto or who they are unto and not unto themselves. So I want to clarify the target. And Pastor Matt talked about this, and he was all over it this morning. I'm like, why am I even talking? Just let Matt talk some more. It was great. But I want to clarify the target and then talk about 4 things every church should implement to help us hit that target. Okay, I'm going to talk about the target and then talk about 4 things that will help you hit, I believe, is the most important target as pastors. Because here's what I've learned. After 16 plus years, 24 years in the ministry, seeing the church go through the COVID situation, through the pandemic, here's what I've learned. Not all pastors know the target. The target's not all the same. And if you don't know the right target, you can be hitting bullseyes every single week. But if you're shooting at the wrong target, that bullseye doesn't matter. We've got to hit the right target. And too many times in church, we thought that our goal was to grow the church. Grow the church. Because what is that tied to? Growing the church is tied to our success. I'm going to talk about us. If we're not careful, we can get in a mindset of the numerics and the demographic, or the dynamics as far as the numbers go, and I can say, oh, the church is growing, so I'm doing good. And here's what happened to me. I'm in a town of 1,200 people. Our church in North City is averaging over 987 people. I'm trying to get accurate with my numbers for my boy. Our church in Mount Carmel was averaging 183 people. So together, we're doing good. I'm feeling good, and I'm going home every week not fulfilled. I would go to pastor's conference. Dr. Clark would just tell me, Chad, it's a miracle. It's a miracle what's happening there. It's awesome. And I'm like, thank you. And I would go home unfulfilled. Why? Because I was shooting at the wrong target. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do, and it was sincere. It wasn't disingenuous, but it wasn't the right target, and God began to speak to me about target. Go to Colossians chapter 1. Let's put the foot on the gas. You guys are going to have to listen faster. Verse 15. Here's what it says. He, talking about Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. He is the visible representation of the invisible God, Jesus. For by him, all things were created that are in heaven and that are on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him, and the next part's very important, and for him. Everything that was created was through him and for him. Verse 17. And he, who's he? You go ahead and play along. Let's go. He is Jesus. Jesus is before all things. Everybody say before. I'm reading out of the New King James. You may have a different translation. He is before all things. Here's what the word before means. The word before is a Greek word that means prior to in point in time and above in primary value. So here's the point. Jesus is prior, he's first, and he's primary in value. Now, I'm going to say some things that are going to be like, duh. But here's what I've been convinced. I've been around church. I've been listening. I've been watching. I watched pastors through the pandemic. I've watched pastors that grew their church and had great churches, had a poor moral life. I've had pastors, I've known pastors that they said they're praying, but they're not really praying because the fruit of their life's not showing it. Because they became about growing the corporation instead of growing this person on the inside of them. And so, if he is prior, before all things, Jesus is before everything. Jesus is primary. He is more valuable than anything. This is our target. Jesus. There is no other target. The target is not 1,000. I wanted to break 1,000. I wanted to be in that group of churches that average 1,000. I got a little globe when we started having, we had like 6 or 7 weeks out of 10 or something that had over 1,000 people. I got a little globe that said, you're one of the churches that break 1,000. I looked at that globe and I still wasn't fulfilled. Why? Because it wasn't the target. Is there anything wrong with breaking 1,000? No, but there's something wrong with it if I'm identified by it. If my value's hanging on it. Can we break 250? Can we break 500? What's your number that's going to bring fulfillment into your life? I'm telling you, there isn't any that I've seen. Now, I haven't seen 5,000, I haven't seen 10,000, but I've seen enough to know that will not move me anymore. I'm over it. I'm over a number of camps, and we started our 3rd one, but I didn't want it. I tried to talk them out of it. So it's not about doing things unto us, it's unto the one who is prior and primary. That's the target. Let's talk about it. He says, so now he is before all things, and in him, man, this is important. In him, all things consist. In him, all things consist. Now the word consist is important. This is a Greek word that means to stand, combine, or unite together. In him, to stand, combine, or unite together, to hold together in its proper or appropriate place or relationship. It's the sense of bringing many parts into cohesive and enduring whole. There's a lot there. I'll make notes available for those who want it. In him, all things consist. That means all these different parts to come together in a cohesive, enduring whole. Where do they come together? Not in the perfect structure, in the person. I'm not talking about, that's not a negative against structure. It's talking about what our structures are unto. The structures are not unto a good usher team. The structures are unto him. Because only in him will our parts to come together as a cohesive whole. They will not come together in me as the leader. They will come together when they are in him. Here's the challenge. Pastors are too much trying to get people to rally around them. Wondering why people won't serve. Frustrated because people won't do this, people won't do that. I'm so tired of hearing pastors complain about people that they're called to serve. Ministry's great if it wasn't for the people. I'm like, please get a different job. Because it's not unto us, it's unto him. And only in Chad's structure, Chad's system, or Chad's church, nothing consists. But in Jesus, it all comes together. That's the target. So we got to make sure as a church, and I know it sounds elementary, it sounds so simple, but I'm promising you it is not universally accepted. Because people are trying to build structures around the church organization instead around the person of Jesus. You're not trying to build a church. You're trying to build people into a person.